What's the worst that lead paint could do to me, or lead exposure?
It could kill you.
Yeah.
But death by, from a person like living in a house dying from lead paint exposure would be really, really rare.
Yeah.
I mean, that you'd have to really be
Unless I was like sanding the walls and snorting the dust.
yeah, and in an enclosed space and doing it all the time, and there's even the workers who are working, they'll get lead levels up into the 70s, 80s, 100, and that won't kill them. I mean, it'll give them some neurologic symptoms, particularly like the peripheral nerves are affected, so like a wrist drop, a foot dragging, that kind of stuff. But though that's I mean, you don't usually ever see that in the United States in the 21st century. We really don't see that because most exposure never gets to that point. I mean, we've been working for 100 years to try to prevent that. So usually what you're looking at are much more subtle effects that are much harder to detect. And so what happens is that like if you overdose on a huge amount of lead, let's say you work in an industry where there's lead, or you work with an organic form of lead, say in a liquid form, you get it on your hand, it's absorbed through your hand, you could be dead by the end of the day because of the amount of lead, and it's acutely toxic to the brain. So, but most people don't get exposed that way, and so what you would expect to see would be more of these longer term effects, which are more related to kidney function, because the lead poisons the kidney because the kidney helps eliminate it.
It affects the bloodstream.
Yeah. So, and it also affects hemoglobin production. So it's interesting chemical because it basically, the body treats it like it's calcium because chemically it's similar to calcium, and so it goes wherever calcium goes. So bone is where most of it ends up.
Would it be stored in with the marrow?
No, it's actually like in the matrix of the bone where the so you have it's kind of this matrix of calcium, hydroxyapatite, and all this other stuff. So the lead, the body kind of thinks that it looks like calcium once again. So it's like, oh, I'll only just plug it in there. Most adults get exposed to lead through inhalation and not any other way. And the way that exposure happens is by disturbing the paint somehow. And that's how most people get exposed anyway. Children, that's how they get exposed. It's not the chunks of lead, it's the dust. Mm-hmm. Women, particularly women at reproductive age, are probably of most concern. Let's say you're a woman who was exposed to lead as a child. When during pregnancy and during lactation, you see increases in the blood lead level in women because the bone is turning over, and so it's releasing that lead.
That was sitting dormant.
Right, and so the so what happens is then that's available, one, to get into the brain in the woman and in the kidneys and everywhere else, but also get into the developing fetus. So that's one of the the concerns, and one of the things that you think about with some of these. There's been a few cases. I mean, you don't see them that often, but there have been cases of women who were lead poisoned who then are pregnant and their lead level actually was fairly low, and it pops back up all during that time, and the question is like, what do you do with that, and how do you deal with that? And it just depends on how high it goes. So children tend to have a lot of hand-mouth behaviors. Adults tend not to, although people who smoke or who have the kind of habitual hand-mouth behaviors will have more potential exposure.
Like oral fixation.
Yeah. Well, or even just smoking a cigarette. You're touching it, and you're touching and you're bringing your fingers close to your mouth, and not necessarily recently been cleaned. CDC is saying, well, it shouldn't be more than let's say we'll go back to pregnant women. Well, you know what? We really should try. We're trying to shoot for something that we're staying, under 5 or 10. Okay. If you had, X micrograms of lead per liter in your water and X micrograms, on the dust in your floor and X micrograms here and X micrograms, blah, 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 what do we think your blood lead level would be? If you were exposed to that on an ongoing basis. One of the things that's been promulgated recently was the renovation standards to try to kind of push forward more lead-safe renovating practices.
Was that-
State of Ohio has been doing training for people who are doing renovations. So those are courses that people can take, particularly like for contractors to take. You have to disclose any known lead hazards. However, if you don't know that they're there, you don't have to say anything. So, in some cases, let's say, so the definition of whether there's lead there or not is more of a, how should I put it, more a legal definition than like an epidemiological definition.
Okay.
So epidemiology would say, because we're studying diseases in people, would say, well, if you live in a house built before 1950, there's pretty much lead paint there. But if this is a real estate transaction and you have no testing to prove that there's lead paint in the house, you can say that I'm not aware of any lead hazards because, well, you're not. Legally you're not, but if you think about it, lead made up about 50% of the dry weight of paint.
Yeah.
So the paint that's sitting on the wall from 1910 is 50% lead. After 78, there shouldn't be any lead paint in any residential housing. So the people who are most likely to get exposed are the ones that are messing with it.